my husband had to keep talking and praying because I was hysterical. I'll be honest with you. And I did have a counselor to talk to me. And then my husband was talking to me. And my husband, one night he just sat down and he said, look, he says, you're upset about having this cancer. He says, but that doesn't mean you're going to die from that. My name is Eleanor, and I am a very active person. I like a lot of outdoor activities. In 2007, I was diagnosed with lymphoma. The proper name that my doctor gave it was the primary cutaneous marginal zone B-cell lymphoma. I went on a trip with some friends, came back, and I noticed I had 2 knots on my shoulder. About a week or 2 later, I noticed these 2 knots on my shoulder, and I thought they were insect bites. So I was treating them with medication. When they started to ache and actually hurt and break open in pus, I went to a dermatologist, and the dermatologist removed them. And each time she removed each knot, I became very sick, which was very strange to me because I've never had anything removed off my body and became sick. And what I did was went on and followed her directions, keeping a gauze pad on and whatever. And I kept getting a strange taste in my mouth, and I didn't know where it was coming from. And I mentioned it to my husband, and he didn't know what I was talking about. He says, well, I ate the same. We had went out for breakfast, and he said, well, I ate the same thing you ate, and I didn't have any aftertaste. I had this weird aftertaste in my mouth. And I still had the knots on my back then. And I hadn't gotten them diagnosed. And when I did get them diagnosed, I still had that weird aftertaste. And I sometimes felt a little nauseous, like nauseated. Finally, the knots came back toward the end of the year. Right after Christmas, the same 2 knots came back. And a 3rd knot came back with it. That's when I went to Duke University to my regular dermatologist. And she referred me over to an oncology dermatologist. Right away, the oncology dermatologist set up a series of blood tests first. And after the blood test, she had me go to a hematologist there at Duke. And I was set up with CT scans, x-rays, all type of x-rays, CT scans, and then I had a bone marrow because by me walking so long with these knots on me, and then they had to biopsy them. They wanted to see was it anything into my blood. So after the biopsies of the knots, it came back October in 2008 that it was B-cell lymphoma. I had just arrived home from work. I was getting ready to go out of town. My phone rang, and here it was, my oncology dermatology doctor telling me that I had cancer, which was very upsetting to me. And I just lost it. I'll be honest, I lost it. And she gave me some appointments to go to, 20 days of radiation, and I had to go for 45 minutes each day. And it was 15 minutes for each a nodule on my back. And the oncology doctor, radiologist, oncology doctor, had told me if I had had one more knot, he would have had to do radiation and chemo. And I was very happy I didn't have to have that, because when I saw what the chemo was like, well, the patients were right there in over on the other side of the room from me. They were they looked like they were very sick people. And the radiation was so strong that the nurse or the nurse could not be in there with me. They were behind glass partitions, and I was in there by myself. And the machine just moved from lump to radiated, and that was kind of scary because I was wondering if there was a pretty big machine, and I was wondering whether I'd be crushed. But they had the thing programmed so it would come right down onto the lump and then radiate it for 15 minutes, and then it would go to the next one. But I had never had nothing like that done, and I didn't know anybody in my family that had anything like that done. So I was quite nervous getting all of that done. But the my doctors, my oncology doctor, the dermatology doctor, she set me up with a counselor. I had a nutritionist, and I had I had the counselor, the nutritionist, and then I had someone like a go-to person that I could sit down and talk to if I had problems. So I was pretty much covered. They took good care of me. I felt tired afterwards. I felt somewhat tired. And what I would do after radiation, I should have had someone with me, but my husband was in school and our daughter lives in Atlanta, Georgia. So I winged it on my own going. So when I had my radiation, they allowed me to sit at the hospital for maybe an hour, and then I could leave and go home if I felt. And then my husband had told me if I didn't feel well enough to drive, to stay there, and he would come and get me. Or either call a cab and come home, and then he'd just go back and get the car. I had to, with my scans, I had one scan that I had to actually admit myself to the hospital because the scan started in the morning around 6 a.m. and I was there all day because after that I went for the bone marrow. So I didn't get out of the hospital until like 6:30, 7 o'clock. And when I went for those scans, the first scan that I went to was in the morning, and I had to drink several liquids, and then they would put me into the machine, and it wasn't like a regular machine that they would put you in for like an MRI. It was real tight, like a tube. It was like they were sticking me down in a tube. But they had earplugs on me. They had music in my ears. They put me in a light blanket, and I had a microphone that I could talk to them. Because once I went down in that tube, I was in there for a while, and I was just praying because I don't have claustrophobia. But when I think about people with claustrophobia, I started getting a little nervous, and I didn't want to do that because I get worked up. So I had to keep myself calm. So I just kept listening, and I really couldn't hear the music that well because when they start the noise up with the scanner, I could not hear. But it was the tightness of the scanner that I had to go in. I wasn't used to being someone putting me. It was like someone putting me in a test tube. That's how tight it was, and I was kind of concerned about that. And I made it through. There was people there that had. I could hear them talking about their journey with cancer, and the family members weren't too happy because they were there for like a second round or the cancer came back. And I was saying, well, to myself, I says, well, maybe this will be the first round for me and then I won't have to bother with this no more. But mine did come out of remission in 2019 and I had to go back. I felt some itching in the area of where I had radiation before, and I made an appointment at my oncology doctor, the dermatologist, And she basically looked at it and said the lymphoma came back. And she biopsied. She said she biopsied it just to be sure. And it was lymphoma. And she set me up again for the radiation. And they just had to go. I had to go for the 20 days, but I just had to go for like 15 minutes just for the one spot. And then I have creams. I have 2 creams that I use for itching. And I have some pills that I take for itching. I go once a year for a skin check. And so far, the skin checks have been excellent. No problems. I still get itching in the areas where I have radiation. And that's why I have the creams to use. When the itching gets to be a problem, I just use the creams. My husband had to keep talking and praying because I was hysterical. I'll be honest with you. And I did have a counselor to talk to me. And then my husband was talking to me. And my husband, one night he said, sat down and he said, look, he says, you're upset about having this cancer. He says, but that doesn't mean you're going to die from that. He said, because you can walk out this door and get hit by a car and die. And when he said that, I said, you're right. He said, so stop focusing in on cancer. He says, and go ahead on and live your life. He says, because if you keep sitting and thinking about it, he says, you're just going to drive yourself crazy. You're going to stop doing the things you like to do. And he says, he says, that doesn't make sense. He says, because people have cancer and they end up dying from a heart attack. And then one of my church members, she had cancer, the same cancer I had, but hers was in a different form. And she ended up dying from a stroke. So his philosophy came to true to light. Because and then my daughter, she was concerned, and she did some research on her own. My oldest sister really did research. She even attended a conference for the Cutaneous Lymphoma Foundation. They were out in Arizona, and she went to the conference, and she was able to bring back a lot of information. And when what really upset me was when I found out it was a blood cancer, because I used to always hear my mother was a nurse, and she was saying once she says once the cancer gets down in your blood and gets in the lymph nodes, that's just about it, But nowadays they have treatment for that, so it's not just about it. Back then it was, but not now. Yes, I held on to hope that I knew I was going to get better. I knew I was going to get better, and I knew that in due time this cancer would go in remission. And what I did, and I prepared myself for if it came back, I didn't want to go off the deep end like I did the first time. So I prayed a lot and talked to the Lord about it. And now I don't worry about it. I don't worry about it. I have certain symptoms of other little things that I've never had before, but when I go to the doctors, they, dermatologists, they look at it and they'll say, no, it's okay. And sometimes I have a phobia, and I'm trying to get out of it. But as soon as something I see on my skin, I have a phobia that, something's wrong. So my doctors have asked me to take a picture of it and send it to them. And if they think that it warrants, because they just about, those doctors been in business for years. So they just about know all the different little things about cancer, skin cancer. And I was concerned about how in the world I got this. The doctors interviewed me to find out my environment that I lived in. I was raised, the first 5 years of my life, I was living on a farm in New Jersey. And they asked me, did I come in contact with pesticides? I said, yes, I did. I said, my parents had vegetable gardens. They had potatoes, they had watermelon, they had blueberries. I think they had strawberries, but they had vegetables and fruits. And I remember that. And then my father had hogs. I can vaguely remember black dirt being not far from the back of the house, and I wasn't allowed to go back there. And I used to sneak back there and play in that black dirt when I was a child. And the area that I lived in, that area right now, people are dying from cancer, and that's they're having all forms, all types of brain cancer, all different types of cancer because pesticides and things were dumped in that ground years ago, and chemicals. I would suggest that if you see something on your body that don't belong there, whether it's a pimple, they call them nodules. I was saying knots, but they call them nodules. Or if you feel funny, you have something that hasn't happened to you before. You see a swollen gland, you see anything, get to the doctors. Don't do like I did trying to dismiss it and treat it yourself. Because I saw those knots back in 2007. It was right, like I went on this trip with friends. It was it was the late spring going into summer. And those knots came up like in the fall, like toward the end of the summer. So that was in 2007. I didn't do anything in 2007. I was treating myself at home. And don't do that. As soon as you see any kind of strange knot on your skin or a pimple that don't want to heal itself, I would see a doctor. Or like you have a mole that's changing, that's changing colors or changing itching and then not not going away, I would see a doctor. Follow through with whatever the doctor has planned for you. Because when they told me I needed radiation, I was in there battling and arguing with the doctor about, well, I don't know if I want that. I was taking it like I didn't have to have it, or I didn't have to have it, or I could have it. And when the doctor actually told me that's cancer you have, it's going to be cancer today, tomorrow, and next year, it's going to be cancer. He says, you want to treat something as soon as you see it. Don't let it fester and grow roots. Cancer grows roots. And he told me, he says, you walk out of this office and you don't sign up for the treatment that I'm trying to give you. He says, don't come back to me and want me to work a miracle when the cancer has already grown roots into you and it's gotten down in your lymph nodes. He said, because I can do something for you, but I can do something better earlier if you catch something earlier. And that's where a lot of people make their mistake. They don't get treatment right away.